cloud because that's
Perfect.
so thank you again all for joining us for the information session about team-based models in California. I am going to hand it over to my colleague and partner in crime, Courtney Ochi.
Awesome. Well, we started the conversation already by sharing a little bit about ourselves, Nicole and myself, part of the Thrive team that have been in the space of education, have been in the building, and now are serving and supporting schools and systems and leaders as they're trying to navigate their next steps, right? And how do we support with those that we get to serve? And so just a quick overview of the many wonderful people who've given us the opportunity to work with them in some of the different capacities. But today is all about talking specifically around the idea of strategically staffing and creating different models for teaming for students and for adults. And so I want to start by posing this idea, right? What if we don't have, it's not a teacher shortage problem, but really a workforce design problem? I could name off all the statistics that we know are impacting our educators and are impacting why people are not choosing teaching or why they're unhappy in their teaching profession. But we already know those details. We know that through the staff that we work with, right? That we have the staff that love to be teachers and that love to be educators, but there are all these additional challenges that have made the profession into something that doesn't feel the same that it did in 2019. And even in 2019, there were things that weren't that great either. And so, what we've really partnered with Arizona State University and the Next Education Workforce around is this paradigm shift, this idea of rather than having one teacher in one classroom responsible for the kids in that room and being the sole provider of all things for all students, what would it look like if we shifted to having teams of teachers and teams of educators really wrapping around students? As we go through this really isn't a one model or a one size fits all solution. You'll see that it looks different in different settings. There's context built in. And so if you're coming for like, this is the prescription and this is the answer, that's not really going to be what we provide. But we are going to say, here are some big level shifts that can happen in your school community. Also recognizing that that's going to make the work feel more authentic and support that change process, right? That change management process as we build and move from just that individual being responsible for all things alone to how do we utilize all the people in the building to support each other. And so really when we look at what our partners are seeking to do and how we are supporting them in this work, it's all about like one, providing students with these deeper and personalized learning experiences so that students, their opportunities for learning are rich, are engaging, right? Are project-based, are designed to build mastery, that they are innovative and deep and rich, and that they're built by these teams of educators, or looking at who's in your room and the different expertise that people hold. And how are we empowering those educators to be well supported, especially when we think about, in a lot of settings, having a large number of new educators in the building, right? New teachers, how are we supporting them? As well as how are we re-energizing and reinvigorating our teachers who have been there for a really long time? And so looking at different ways to specialize, to advance, and to really be a professional within this work. And so, early outcomes have been that educators in team-based models are more satisfied. They're happier to be there. There's definitely more collaboration involved, planning and implementation, but also in data-driven outcomes, like looking at data together and making decisions that are more responsive to student needs. And then having better teacher and student interactions. We'll talk about this a little as I share about our California cohort specifically, but it is, thinking that one person is going to magically connect with each person in the room is also unrealistic, right? Like, I don't click with every person that I meet in life, and that's the reality. And sometimes having these teams and giving students these multiple adults to connect with, they find their person in. So that's a beauty in this. And it feels fulfilling for our educators, as well as seeing really good student outcomes, students growing in their reading, their math, like learning. And it doesn't highlight this in here, but in their SEL practices too, having their needs met. And so we are fortunate that this year we had launched this work with 13 schools across 7 different systems across California. You'll see in our little graphic of California that we're in different communities in California, and California is a big place. So it looks very different. We're in rural, suburban, urban communities. We're in a school of 230 students, but we're also in a place with 29,200 students in a large district. And the really big areas of focus and reason why all of these schools have chosen teaming is different. So I think that's something to really highlight, is that they didn't all come to this for one reason or one model. We have folks that said, you know, special education inclusion is our reason why we want to do this, because our special educators are out on an island and we're not sure how to best integrate them into our program, and how do we ensure that we're doing really inclusive practices, particularly for our students that would traditionally be in an SDC. So that's one reason we have people joining us. Another is around ELD, right, with high English learner populations. And you know, we see this efficacy around designated ELD, particularly kind of, it varies in different settings. And so we have school communities that are like, we really want to do right by our multilingual learners. How are we creating these teaming opportunities so that we're best supporting them? Chronic absenteeism is a huge one that we have a team up in Northern California that has actually launched already this year. And they started with freshman teams because they saw that that transition from middle school to high school was a big jump. And their overall like data has been incredible in terms of their chronic absenteeism rate from last year to this year for their freshmen. Looking at these teams have created this sense of belonging for students. Another team has come to us because they're trying to address issues with non-credentialed teachers. So they have 25% of their system as currently non-credentialed, working on emergency sub-permits. And they're trying to figure out, how do we regroup and how do we team together so that the credentialed teachers that we do have in the building are helping to best support the teachers that require mentorship in a way that's not burning them out, and they actually have crossover and capacity to work together. Others are seeking, you know, opportunities for teacher leadership. How do we grow our teachers and give them feelings of responsibility that aren't just like adding things onto their plate, but really feel fulfilling, and creating differentiated and personalized learning. And so those are just some of the areas that have been targeted. And it's not like each school is doing all these things, but each school is like, this is our why, that we have decided that our educators really need to work together in teams. And so I'll give you a little a framework of what teaming actually means and what it can look like to describe that process. And I'm going to try to do it as much justice as our awesome partners at ASU would do, and share that, you know, here is an example of what we are typically seeing right now. That, let's say this is a third grade class or a third grade level. You'd have maybe four teachers, maybe two teachers, maybe three teachers, however many teachers you have, but they're all working in silos, right? And teacher A is responsible for their 25 students, and that is who they are taking on. They're teaching them everything, every piece, they are their all. And you know, we've seen pushes in PLCs and in collaboration and ways to connect teachers, but at the end of the day, they're going back to their own classrooms and really working in that setting. And so even though we've created really great opportunities in some places for connection, it doesn't extend into the classroom. It extends as a sub part of that. And so in the famous terms of Brent Madden, who talks in chili peppers. I love that this is our first chili pepper opportunity. This is like I'm dipping my toe in. I want to see what this could be. So an idea is that you take your 4 teachers, or how, and this will look different in various settings, but maybe 2 of them come and team together. One of them becomes the ELA and math planner. Maybe they're responsible for the family communication for those 50 students that they're now sharing. And the other person is the science and social studies planner, but they're working with tech integration, it says, right? Like there are different ways that you can do this, but this is one model where you're looking at, okay, maybe we'll departmentalize into areas of strength. Another way that we see this happening is, rather than departmentalizing, we're all going to teach all things, but our kids are going to be fluidly mixing in. So teacher A and teacher B are both ELA teachers, but they're fluidly regrouping students. They're dynamically doing that so that on one day versus another, they have different students with them based on need. But now teacher A is maybe only focusing on so many things to be planning as opposed to everything. It gets a little spicier in the model if you combine the whole group together, because now there are even more specializations, right? So you can have somebody that's really dedicated to the ELA planning in the group, or someone that's really dedicated to, the connections, the SEL support, the well-being. I share this story of being, if that first year, I was a first year Teach for America Corps member in my classroom. I had a lot of heart. I did not have a lot of skill, right? I did not go to college to be an educator, and I was learning on the fly, and I loved my kids so much, but I was not a great or effective math teacher. But I was the only person teaching math for these students. And that is such a scary thing. And I worked in a place where we didn't have these opportunities to share, to collaborate in that. And so while I felt like I was giving really great SEL instruction, I was not giving great math instruction, but I had something to give to my team, but I felt so deflated because of how difficult the math and the ELA were to really instruct in that first year. And when we think about these teams, we're also thinking about, how do we ensure that those people don't leave because they didn't feel successful in that one area? Like they have strengths, but they weren't utilized. And so when we think about teaming, we're seeing like, what are the strengths of the different people on our team and how are they coming together? They share this entire roster of students, but they're doing it in a way that's manageable, that's structured, because it's by expertise, or it's really in a way that's thinking strategically. And in the spiciest of models, there are other ways of integrating, right? You might decide that in this model, you're using a lead teacher, somebody who is taking the lead, taking the charge of this work. You have your special education team integrated as part of the team in the model. You may be using paid teacher residents. And so we've seen really, really strong models coming out of Arizona where they're partnering with the local university to provide teaching candidates and students doing their teaching to come into schools and provide that support while they're learning in the process, and they're getting paid for it. And in other ways, incorporating, project-based learning mentors or different community experts into the field. There's data support. So there's all these possibilities of people you can bring in. Some of them are employed by the school. So some of them might be people who are already within your existing system. And then others of these might be parent volunteers. They might be experts in the field. They might serve across the school. And so there's different ways of just leveraging who's available, who can we think about as part of our education ecosystem for students, so that now it's not just this teacher being responsible for the 25 kids, but they have this team of wealth and knowledge to support them in the process. And this is obviously a school model that we showed with a 4 class grade level. Not always the case for many schools. This would be a smaller K-8 model. And so we're seeing that in a traditional setting, right? You just have maybe 1 class per grade, a kindergarten teacher, a first grade teacher, right? All of them doing their own thing. But in a teaming model, you're really combining and looking at some of those grade levels and how they can then support and become a team together. How can our K through 2 teachers team together? How could our 3 through 5 teachers? Because the reality is, in a first grade classroom in there, they're going to have students with a wide range of abilities and a wide range of differentiation needs to support, right? You're going to have, even if you're a first grade teacher, you're going to have students working at a pre-kindergarten level. You're probably going to have students working at a second grade level. And so how are you building the team to develop and share expertise all together? We see this at the high school level too, in a really beautiful way that you can build out these core teams. And I'll show you a schedule that really supports this, is that when we think about, the different teachers and the different blocks that a student goes through in high school, they might see their English teacher, they see their science teacher, they see their math teacher, but those are all separate, isolated classes and courses with different students. And so that feeling of community and belonging gets difficult, and that feeling of connection of, where do these courses intersect? Where do they align? Why does if I really only like science, why do I have to go to English class, right? Those things start to develop sometimes in a traditional schedule. And when we think about teaming together, it's looking at, okay, maybe the English and the math and the science teacher are actually a teaching team along with Spanish. And so for half of their day, rather than it being, okay, period 1, I go to English, period 2, I go to math, it's that I know during periods 1 through 4, I'm seeing these 4 subject teachers, but when I see what each teacher might vary day to day. Sometimes we're working on cross-curricular projects. So a group of us are going to English and math for 2 periods over time now. And then like in the other parts of their day, they still have opportunities for electives, for choice, or seeing some other classes. But for half of their day, they are together, they are working together, and those teachers can group those students either homogeneous or heterogeneously, depending on the day, depending on what they're working on. So really responsive and really connective to that. The big 3 takeaways we hope from this are that there are 3 shifts. So I've shown 3 model examples, and they all vary, and they're all going to look different in either context, but there are 3 things that reign true regardless of that. And one is the shift in staffing model, that we're moving from a traditional staffing model of a 1 teacher, 1 classroom model to a team-based staffing model. And that supports developing more expertise in fewer things, but doing it more deeply, more richly. Class size ratios are going to vary based on what student needs are. There is data-driven decision-making that's supporting that, and that there's a lot of collaboration and the opportunity for your special educators, your community educators to participate in this. We've actually also seen that teaming models have supported with some of the sub shortage issues that are going on, because the rest of the team knows what's going on. So it's not just like that one class is off for the whole day. And if you have been a principal and you pass by that class with a guest teacher and you're like, oh my gosh, I just hope they stay safe today. That doesn't happen, because the team can wrap around and ensure that there's continuity of coverage when someone's out. There's also deeper opportunities for teaching and learning. So that's the second shift, is that, it moves from classes being just like, I'm here for English or I'm here for math, to there's deeper opportunities to embed the learning, to make it interdisciplinary, to differentiate by small groups, because you're looking at a wider pool of students now. So when you're creating your small groups, you don't have these one-off outliers. And you can be flexible about learning spaces and how students move throughout that space. And having the flexibility in longer amounts of time, especially as you saw in our high school block, allows for, the opportunity to get deeper into learning. And the third shift is really around entry, specialization, and advancement, is that I think about, again, that first year teacher being a part of a team, knowing that they're supported, but also for our veteran teachers who get to have really meaningful mentorship opportunities now, because they're actually working and seeing the students that the teachers that they're mentoring are working with, right? It's not this, oh, what are you doing in your classroom? But I'm seeing what you're doing, because we're working together, we're sharing these students. And really opportunities for leadership, because not all teachers want to be principals, but they want another role and they want to be leveraged as leaders. And so, as we think about those three shifts, just a big idea to consider is that, there are these are some design elements around staffing, around personalized and individualized learning, and around entry specialization and advancement. But there's no one model to this. And as I've gotten to see in our work in California, every community has taken this off and taken this to match the needs of their community. It's going to be iterative. It's not a linear process, that it's the beginning stages of working with teams and working with those in the building to develop. This is huge, especially for our schools, working with their union or labor partners who are working with teachers who have been there for a long time, right? Really creating this together and creating it to match the need for the people in the building, not doing this for other reasons, but really recognizing why is it that our teachers need this and why are they saying that? And then that we're only doing this, it should be good for students, families, and educators, right? That we make moves to make good change. And so it's not change for change, but it's looking at what is our need for change and making those shifts in those areas and doing that in ways and measuring that it's working for students, it's working for families, and it's working for educators in this. Our pathway forward in where we are forging this work as we shared, is that we have our California team that is excitedly either launching this year or launching next year. And for teams that are interested in launching in the fall into these teaming approaches, that this year we're able to offer professional learning both through Arizona State University's Next Day Education Workforce, as well as coaching that we provide. So for the teams that are interested in launching immediately, like they're on the ground, they're ready to go, this year, there are opportunities for us to support them through virtual sessions designed particularly for site level leaders to really be planning and designing their models, and a summer institute where educators can join in for 3 days virtually to plan and prepare for their shift in the fall. And this comes with coaching from our team, as well as an on-site planning day for facilitation. And I think this model really lends itself well for predominantly smaller teams that have a little bit more motion and movement, as well as teams that are interested in launching for the following year. So these are this can be for people who are like, I want a little more runway to plan, especially those moving in larger districts or systems, where really, when we talk about that speed of trust, we want to ensure that we're incorporating all the voices in the room and ensuring that it is a really responsive approach to garnering feedback from within. That next year would involve professional learning at both the systems level of leadership, at the site level, and at the teaching level. And then on our part would include virtual coaching and on-site planning. And one of the things that we are, this last year, we were fortunate to receive grant funding for this work, to support this work with our teams. And so we anticipate grant funding for this work to help cover the cost of these opportunities and to support this learning for our teams. And we are hopeful because of the great movement that we've seen so far. And so that is a little bit about what this can look like, and excited to kind of chat more about what it looks like within your context.